And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie. School's in, bitches.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie, and we are going to talk about Pat Musitano getting hit in Canada last week, and we are going to do a huge Q&A. But before I get there, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing with Mob Talk Radio. There's a lot of rumors out there, a lot of bullshit, and a lot of lies being spread per the usual. So let's just get down to it. First of all, over the last couple years, I've had a lot of different people offer me different things, different suggestions. Go on this platform, go on that platform, join this group of podcasters, join that group. And it was just something that just never made a whole lot of sense to me. Not because of money reasons, just because I think, one of the things I try to do, I've earned this the hard way. A lot of people buy subscribers and do that kind of deal. I don't do that. I did it the hard way. And for all the knuckleheads that keep making that fucking stupid accusation, let me explain something to you that you don't know. First of all, you cannot monetize on fucking YouTube if you buy subscribers. There is I don't want to call it a glitch or whatever the fuck, but what it is they have it set up so that if you are caught buying subscribers, you can no longer monetize and they can delete your channel. So anybody that likes to bring that fucking nonsense saying that I bought this, I did that, it's all bullshit. You can't do it. It's foolproof. You can't do it. I did this the hard way, and I've always done that. I would rather earn it the hard way and the responsible way, which is what I've always done. So there are those that are out there that do have shows that have bought subscribers, but it's just not something that you can do if you want to monetize. So that ought to clear that up. But basically what I'm talking about is over the last few years, there's been a lot of different platforms, a lot of different shows, a lot of different things that people have come to me and wanted me to be a part of. I never chose to do it because it just didn't make sense for me at the time to do it. And I was kind of sitting back just wanting to build what I do, build my show up a little more, and maybe somebody would come along, right? So last week I want to say, and I'm going to be very careful about how much I do say, because it's not totally done deal yet, as it were. I mean, it's verbal agreement. Everything's there. It's just there are a couple other things that need to happen. But I was having a conversation with somebody about the show and where we were going to go with it, what I was trying to attempt to do, what I was going to do. And one of the things that's always bothered me was I didn't want to charge for content. That was sort of the last thing I ever wanted to do, because I think that there's a way that, you can still do what you want to do, make a little bit of money on the side, and still bring the same content without having to change anything. And so for a year, I kind of sat back saying, well, I don't have many alternatives. This is what I'm going to have to do. And up until last week, that's exactly what I was going to do. And it would have worked. I don't think that there's any sort of suggestion that it wouldn't have. It would have been fine. However, I was in a car having a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about the show and what I wanted to get from it, and, subscribers, all the details of what you're trying to attain. And one of the comments that I made to this person was, listen, once I go to this site and I do my own thing, that's it. I'm not going to sign with nobody else, because there have been offers. It's just the offers were not, they didn't allow me the creative ability to do some of the things that I do. Listen, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. You should know that by now. But at the end of the day, I just said, look, if somebody comes along between now and next week when I start to set everything up, then, if they make me an offer, then that's great. We'll see what it is. And I don't know what it is. Maybe I put myself out in the universe a little bit too much or whatever. But what ended up happening was I got an offer. And I didn't get an offer from one of these, two podcast show people. I mean, this is a very, very, very big platform. It's run by somebody that's famous. It's somebody that I don't know, to be honest with you. I know of this person because this person was a fan of the show or whatever, and I knew of this person just from, watching TV and stuff like that and movies and etc. And so basically what ended up happening was there was a minor discussion about it between me and this person. And, I really didn't honestly think for a second that this guy was being serious with me. I just got to be honest with you. I didn't think he was being serious, but he was. And we talked, and it just seems like it's probably the best opportunity for me. It's on a huge platform. It's going to get a ton of exposure. And that's really, at the end of the day, what you want if you're trying to do this thing. While I love YouTube, and YouTube's been good to me, and while YouTube has an infinite amount of people, YouTube is one of those things where you really have to pay to get promotion and advertisement and stuff like that. But if you do that, you can't monetize. So a lot of people are trading off monetizing for exposure, and that's just not something that I was willing to do. So more or less, I would love to tell you when the show is going to move. I would love to tell you the website it's going to be on. I'd love to tell you who I'm involved with, but I can't, just for a lot of different reasons at this point. But once I believe, and I don't want to, I got to be a little careful here, but I believe, obviously I have a meeting this week about it. And I think it's something that is going to be really good. It's a huge platform with some very famous people, and that helps. That definitely helps for exposure. So the show is going to remain free. There will not be a charge for that. And so instead of going to YouTube, you're going to go to a website. And everything that I do right now is going to be over there. The only difference is going to be that it will not be on YouTube. I will still keep the Mob Talk radio page. Obviously, that is probably going to change a little bit. But that's pretty much, we're going to keep it going the way that we do now. There's going to be some changes as far as what I do. The content's going to be the same. I'm still going to be an abrasive prick, but I'm no longer going to give these idiots any 2 seconds of fame. It's done. It's over. They can continue to say what they want, complain, make up lies. That's all they're good at doing. They never address me. They always address other people. So I'm just going to leave it there. And I think that, like anytime you do anything, there's going to be haters, and I'm comfortable with that. I always have been. I don't give a shit what they think, and I never fucking will. We do have some guests coming on this show. That is one thing that I've been trying to lock down the last couple of days, just so that I could get myself ahead of the curve, so to speak, because I don't know when the change will come. I'm assuming, and then this is just, don't hold me to this, but I'm assuming in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be over there. So what does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to do another show after this on YouTube? I don't know. Until this sort of agreement or deal is sort of finalized and I know exactly where I'm going, what I'm doing, and when the unveiling is going to happen, then I can tell you. So you're going to have to keep it marked down on Facebook and just check the fucking the posts that I make and etc. to sort of figure out what's going on. And then obviously I'm not going to say where I'm going, who I'm going with, who I'm doing this with, because at this point it's just better I keep that kind of quiet until this is all over and done with. But I do have some great guests coming on. I think that some of the guests are going to be a surprise. I think some won't. It's not going to be any informants or anything like that, but I just want to leave it at there. But we do have some good guests that are going to come on. So it's going to be the same show, same style. There's going to be a couple of different things we're going to do. But like I said, until this is all said, over, and done with, at least from a, so to speak, paperwork type of thing, that I'm just going to say that we're definitely coming on a new show. It's going to be a new platform, and we'll just see what it brings. But that's pretty much the update as far as what's going on. I wish I could announce it today. I was kind of hoping I'd be able to, but I can't until things are settled and done, and I know exactly what the parameters are. But short of anything fucking up in the next couple of days, that looks like where I'm going to head. And I will say this, that a couple of the people that they have on their service or on their platform are big names, huge names. So I'm not exactly going from obscurity to like relevance. That's not the point. I'm just, finally, I think I'm being recognized for my ability of what I can do. And this is bigger than any of these other schmucks that are out doing their thing. They can all sit on YouTube and do their pay me now crap. This is a huge platform, mega platform, with famous people. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Hopefully, in the next couple of days, I'll know exactly what is going to happen. So that's the update as far as that goes. So at this point, we're going to jump into the Pat Musitano hit in Canada. Obviously, we know he got killed. If you're unfamiliar with this, you can look the information up for yourself. But the one thing I wanted to talk about was why this happened. Obviously, I'm not going to be fucking 100% right on this because I don't think anybody is. There's always stuff you don't know about that's going on. But I think that that I have a fairly good grip of what is going on there. And this has been going on for, probably 3+ years at this point. So as we know, Pat Musitano was killed. So basically the long end of this is that the Musitano crime family had been bumping heads against the Rizzuto crime family the last 2 years. But prior to all of that, the Rizzutos and the Musitanos were aligned for a long time. And we're going to kind of get into that a little bit. But, obviously we know that Pat Musitano, they tried to kill him 8 months ago. And he was shot a bunch of times and ended up living. Right after he was shot the first time, it was alleged that there was a peace treaty between whatever the warring factions were. Now, was it the Rizzutos or was it Ndrangheta? A lot of people have said it was the Rizzutos. A lot of people have said it's Ndrangheta. I have a tendency to believe that it was Ndrangheta, to be honest with you, and there's a lot of different reasons for that, which we'll get into. But since the first attempt on Musitano's life, there's been sporadic shootings all over the place, but nothing like we have seen the last 2 years. Musitano was 52. He was gunned down, I believe it was last Friday in Burlington, Ontario. Back in May of 2019, Musitano was shot outside of his lawyer's office, I think 6 or 7 times, and he was able to survive that hit. Then in 2017, his house gets shot up in an effort to send a serious message that his days were numbered and he should just get out of the mob. So what I did was, after I read this, I made a phone call to somebody I know in Laval, which is in Quebec, and this person's very familiar with what was going on over there. And he told me that this was purely revenge act, and this is for something that the Musitano crime family, specifically Angelo Musitano and Pasquale Musitano, did a decade or so ago. So to put this in contrast, this beef really didn't begin until 2013 after Rizzuto dies. The lanes of organized crime in Canada were all owned and driven by Rizzuto. It's known that the Musitanos, prior to Rizzuto's death, were close allies, and they were protected by Rizzuto's power. Once Rizzuto dies, all bets are off. Some people have claimed that the loyalists of Gianni Pops Papaglia, who Angelo Musitano had killed 20 years prior, was something that never sat well in organized crime circles. Gianni Pop was the boss of Hamilton at one point, and that murder never sat well with the rivalries that were going on. In fact, both Musitanos actually were indicted for that murder. They ended up pleading out to killing Gianni Pop's bodyguard, Carmen Bolaro, and in doing so, the charges for murdering Gianni Pops were dropped. So they admitted to killing his bodyguard, so they dropped the RCMP drops the charges against Gianni Pops. And it's worth noting that the Musitanos had backed Rizzuto, who was of Sicilian origin, who was encroaching into Calabrian-owned territories in Ontario, i.e. Ndrangheta. Everything in Canada is set up by territory in different areas and etc. The Rizzutos wield a lot of power, but in that Ontario area was always sort of Calabrian gangsters. And so when, Rizzuto starts to kind of encroach into those areas, it creates a lot of fucking friction and a lot of fucking problems. And a lot of Musitano's issues, other than greed and treachery, was that Ndrangheta largely left Musitano alone until he officially backed the Sicilians and he backed Montreal over to Toronto. To Ndrangheta, it was a sign of disrespect, and they felt that he didn't have that much power and that he was simply hiding behind the Rizzutos, which is what he was doing in essence. And by backing the Rizzutos, Musitano ends up backing the wrong horse. Another problem that Musitano had was that he was pushing his territory east into Mississauga, Toronto, and Vaughan. Wiretaps would catch rivals bemoaning them, calling Pat and Angelo the two fatzos, the two idiots, so they were not very well liked. Another issue for Musitano was that they had grown up with, Dominic Violi, and they grew up with him and they were close friends. Dominic Violi's father was the head of 'Ndrangheta for a long time, and the Rizzutos had issues with him, and ultimately it was the Musitanos, mainly Pat and Angelo, who ordered the hit on Violi's father, which created a lot of problems. And Dominic Violi goes to the Musitanos for help, but they continued to back Rizzuto, and they continued to back the Sicilian mobsters in Toronto, which created even more problems. And everybody, Musitano especially knew his life was in danger. I mean, after they hit on his brother Angelo, he ends up getting his car armor plated. The windows were replaced with glass, which was 19 millimeters thick. Tires were fitted with reinforced inserts so that, God forbid, if the tires blew out, he'd still be able to drive on it. But this was a long time coming, especially if you look at all of the hits that have taken place in Canada the last year and a half. There's been a lot of them. Al Iavarone, who was really a real estate guy, for the Rizzutos. So the question is, who was responsible for this? Well, one, I don't think they're ever going to find out. I think that the hit on Angelo Musitano was really kind of tracked back to 'Ndrangheta. And once again, we've said this a million times on this show, is what they're warring over is fucking turf. When Rizzuto was there, he had it locked down. It was all his. Not many people were going to fuck with him. But what we saw after he died was there was sort of a schism in the family. There was shots fired on all sides, and a lot of it is that Montreal is Rizzuto territory, and Ontario is typically 'Ndrangheta territory. And when everybody starts to encroach, that's when the shots get fired, and that's what's been going on. Obviously, we had the murder of Cici Lupino, which created a lot of massive problems in Canada itself. So I'm not sure if war is on. I can't say that, but I think that this could just as easily, I could make an argument with you saying that this came from within the Musitano crime family. It could have. You never know. For a guy to get shot 6-7 times and live, his brother gets killed, and he's still fucking traveling the streets. Not too bright, because gangsters are patient. They're going to wait. They're going to find you, and they're going to get you. And then I think the fact that Musitano knew that and didn't lay low, maybe that speaks a little bit to his ego, because a lot of people that I have talked to that knew him said he was a complete egomaniac, sort of a, I think they said gangster chic is the term that they used. A high-driven guy, but he was not well liked by a lot of people. And so I don't know if this is sort of a thing that is within the Musitano crime family, or whether this is an outside job. To me, this screams sort of inside, but I don't know. Obviously I'm not in the streets in Canada. I don't know what's going on, but I don't think that the murder of Pat Musitano is going to change much, except for what we need to look towards. If you're going to look for a couple of signs, is if this was done from outside, there's going to be a retaliation. At some point, there will be a retaliation for it. And I don't think it would be something that would be like weeks or months. There's going to be a retaliation fairly quickly, but I don't think that's what the case is here. I think, I'm kind of on the fence. On one hand, this smells like 'Ndrangheta all day long, because this is what they've been doing for months. But on the other hand, this smells like an inside job to me. I just don't know. I just think the fact that the two people that were with Musitano were not killed. They were shot, but they were not killed. Says a lot about what was going on too, because obviously Pat Musitano was the fucking target. And so what this means moving forward basically is, are the Musitanos, now that they're pretty much, their leadership has been killed, what happens now? Does somebody step in and sort of bridge the gap between 'Ndrangheta and the Rizzutos and the other problems are they going to have? Or is this going to be a situation where 'Ndrangheta sees it as the family's unstable, let's take over Ontario now and kick them the fuck out? That's, that if we look at this murder on its face, that's what it says to me. Getting him out of the way, I don't think was just simply revenge. I think it had a lot to do with not only his ego and sort of upsetting the apple cart around him. You got to understand the way Canada is set up. It's not that one crime family owns all of fucking Canada. I mean, especially when you get into like Ontario, that's where it starts to get a little bit weird. And the Rizzutos, trying to push into Ontario, they probably could have done it. And had Rizzuto not died, they probably could have taken it over pretty quickly. But once Rizzuto dies, and then you see people shooting at, Rizzuto's son and all of this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of different moving parts of this, and then you got the bikers that are vying for power and territory. So at the end of the day, I could give you 15 different fucking scenarios of what I think happened. But the reality is, Pat Musitano is dead. He's gone. It's over. And so now it becomes, is somebody going to step up in his place to lead them in the right direction? Are they going to, bridge the gaps? Are they going to offer an olive branch to get the murders to stop? If Andrangeta has shown us anything in the last 3 years in Canada, is that they're willing to kill, they're willing to take you out, and they're willing to hold on to their territory as much as they can. And I don't think that's going to stop. And so it's obviously whatever piece of cord there might have been wasn't there. But I don't see the Rizzutos being involved in this. I don't think, unless there's some deal with the Rizzutos and Andrangeta about let's get rid of these guys and then we'll split the turf. That would make sense to me too. But I just don't know. This is sort of a very convoluted, all over the place kind of thing. But I think the reality is, I think Andrangeta was probably behind it, and they have their reasons. They're vying for power in Ontario, and that's really what this has been all about the last couple of years. They're not going to give up their turf to nobody, and they're not going to give up turf to anybody whose really sole power came from the Rizzutos. And I think that Andrangeta, and I hate to make it a fucking Neapolitan and a fucking Sicilian thing, because that's what this is, and in some ways it is. But I think when you're in a position like Pat Musitano is, and your power base and your protection, because their protection came from the Rizzutos. Nobody would fuck with them because they were with the Rizzutos. But once Rizzuto goes, they lose their protection, they lose their insulation, and then they're on their own. And then he makes a series of fucking stupid mistakes along the way. And now he's paid for it with his life. So, I think from an Andrangeta perspective, obviously Musitano is based in the Ontario area, and I think that if you have to look at it from a business sense, what's good for business is that everybody's making fucking money and nobody's firing at each other. There's more than enough money to be fucking made. But with Pat Musitano in an Andrangeta stronghold area, isn't going to give up an inch, isn't going to do nothing, isn't willing to work with nobody, what do you think's going to happen? They're going to shoot him. And they... after being shot 6 times, I don't know about anybody else that's listening to this, but I would probably move. That would be it for me. I survived being shot 6 times. I'm fucking gone. This guy, not so much. So I give him credit as far as, putting his nose to the fucking grindstone and not putting up with shit and just fucking business as usual. But at the end of the day, there is politics that are involved in this. And when you back Rizzuto, and typically an area that belongs to a different criminal organization, you're going to have problems. You're going to rub elbows, as they say, and you're going to knock heads. And that is something that's been going on for a couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Musitanos are going to align themselves with somebody. It's going to be interesting to see what they do as far as retaliation, because that's going to speak volumes to me, the retaliation effect. If there is no retaliation, then I have to sort of start to wonder, was this something that was from the inside out? We see this all the time in mob families. There's always underlings that want to be at the top, think they can do it better than the boss, and they grab a gun and they do what they got to do. So it's going to be interesting to see how this fleshes out, but I just don't think this is done by any stretch of the imagination, because a lot of people that I've talked to have said the Musitano wasn't very respected. His father, Dominic, was, but he wasn't. And I think that when you're not respected by, people in your own circles, that's a problem. When you're not respected by people outside of your circles and they don't fear you, that's a problem too. So I think it's going to be very interesting. And I don't know what the relationship now with the Rizzutos and the Musitanos is. From what I understand, there was sort of a split after Vito Rizzuto died. So I'm not sure. But I think this is just the beginning of probably a power play in some form or fashion. And I think this is still going to take place in Ontario because they're still warring over that territory. So that's what I know. That's what's been going on. And I just, does it shock me? No, it really doesn't shock me. When I saw the news scrolling about what happened, it didn't shock me. I knew it was coming. Because guys that shoot you 6 times, then they kill your brother, then they shoot at your house. How many messages does a motherfucker have to get? I think killing my brother would have been a biggest message. You're next. Then they shoot you, then they shoot up your house. I mean, how many messages does it fucking take? But I give the guy credit. He wasn't scared. He didn't give a fuck. He just kept doing his thing, but he paid for it with his life. So whatever happens from here is going to be very telling. And sort of to round this out, one of a couple things is going to happen. You're either going to get retaliation, massive retaliation for that hit. If there is no retaliation, then that tells me a couple things. That either one, it was an inside job and it was within the crime family itself. And 2, that'll tell me if there's no retaliation that Musitano wasn't respected within his own crime family. Because at some point, you got to defend your own. And if they don't do it, I don't think it's because of police pressure or nothing like that, or the RCMP putting pressure on them. I think it's going to have to do with if they don't retaliate for this, considering the last 3 years in Canada, what's happened, tit for tat every other week. That's going to be more telling to me than anything. So we shall see. But, if you live in Canada and you want to talk about this, send me a message over on Facebook and we'll definitely chew the fat, so to speak, on this. And if anybody has any comments of that, you know how to reach me over on Facebook. So all that being said, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to get into the Q&A. I know at times we like to have a lot of fun on this show, but it's time to get serious about one thing. I know that the coronavirus pandemic has hurt a lot of my listeners in their businesses. Restaurants have been ordered to close, gyms have been ordered to close, cigar lounges have been ordered to close, and even bars have been ordered to close. These are small businesses that don't always have the cash reserves to continue making their rent or mortgage payments. They can't even pay their vendors. My good friend Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen is an experienced bankruptcy lawyer that is there to help you right now. Kaysen & Kaysen represents individuals and small businesses in complex bankruptcy proceedings in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Miami. Give Mike a call at 646-397-6226. And if you mention Mob Talk Radio, he's going to give you a free consultation. Once again, it's Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen, 646-397-6226. On a given week, I'm out of town a lot. Whether it's Philadelphia, it's New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, wherever the case may be, I'm always looking for a place where I can sit down and have a great dinner. Ambiance is key, price is obviously key, but the most important thing is the food good? And there's a place I want to tell you about today. It's called Saltwater at Margate. If you are going down to the shore, because I know a lot of people in Philadelphia go to the shore, especially Margate, you're missing out on a great restaurant if you haven't been there. The name is Saltwater Margate. It's at 9401 Ventnor Avenue, Margate City, New Jersey. The phone number there is 609-289-8078. You can also visit them online at saltwatermargate.com. This place is unbelievable. Not only is the food absolutely superb, the price is great too. They're renowned for their pizza and their gnocchi. They have all kinds of different things from mussels to roast pork and Italian fare. So do yourself a favor, do me a favor, go and visit Saltwater Margate. You will not be disappointed. It is a place that I think at some point, if not already, there's going to be lines out the door and around the block. So if you're down on the shore, stop in, go to Saltwater Margate. At least check them out online at saltwatermargate.com. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio, and we are going to do a Q&A per the usual. I think I had over 180 questions. between Facebook and Instagram and personal messages, whatever the case may be. But per the usual, if I don't get to your question, it's just because it's either too in-depth or I've covered it a million times. We will be doing a show on some point, or at least at some point, with all recycled questions. Also, I'm going to say this, that I think once I move to the new platform, the first show we're going to do, we're going to talk about Whitey Bulger. And the reason why we're going to talk about him is we're going to talk about him and we're going to talk about the government's corruption in that case. And we're going to cover the documentary that was made called Whitey Bulger versus the United States of America. And so we're also going to recycle some shows. And when I say that, meaning we are going to cover some familiar topics in a different kind of way. So I'm looking forward to doing all that. I've been working on this Whitey Bulger show for a while. Has not obviously been recorded yet, but that is probably going to be the first show out of the gate on the new platform. So you can look forward to that. All right. Per the usual, like I said, if I don't get to your question, I apologize. Hopefully going forward on the new platform, which will probably be 4 shows a month. Probably 2 Q&As a month. I haven't figured all that out yet, but we'll figure it out as it goes. All right, so did you see the new preview of the new mob documentary coming out on Netflix July 22nd? Your thoughts? I think that I have seen the preview for it, and I think it's called Fear City, New York versus the Mafia, and I think it's produced by the same people that did that Don't Fuck with Cats documentary about the serial killer Luca Magnotta. I did see the preview. And here's my thing. I have a hard time. I don't like Rudy Giuliani. That's for obvious reasons, for multiple reasons. I don't want to go into that, but I saw he was going to be on it. And then there's the typical rat squad, which they put on every fucking documentary. And here's my thing. The validity of anything that you watch and that you take in, you have to consider the source, even with me. So I'm not just being biased with them. But when your information comes from people that are blowhards, jerk-offs, and liars, then you lose some validity. Will I watch it? Absolutely, I'm going to watch it. But the problem is I already know ahead of time what the problem for me is going to be. And it's going to be that they sat down with rats and interviewed them for 2 fucking hours on things they don't know nothing about. And that's my thing. Listen, everybody's entitled to, watch what they want, take in what they want, but you always got to consider the source. And if everybody just took 10 fucking minutes out of their day and researched some of the shit that these people say, you'll find very quickly that they're lying. They can't back up anything with facts. As a matter of fact, I got a message from my buddy out in Detroit just a few minutes ago saying, Jesus Christ, did you look at the comments under the Ralph Natale show? People believe him. They think he's an OG. And that's the problem, is that a lot of people if they put an ounce of energy into research and looking it up for themselves, it only takes 20 fucking minutes, they would find that these guys are full of shit. In the case of Ralph Natale, which is the most hilarious show I've ever listened to in my life. He was made twice. Wow. Big guy, tough guy, baldy headed. Hey, I spit on you. I kill more people than cancer. Fuck him. And so that's my thing. Does a documentary lose its validity because they interviewed rats? Yeah, it does. I'm just going to say it. You cannot take a guy who was a nothing in that fucking life, who is delusional about who he is, and then that goes for many of them. This isn't about one person. And they insert themselves in every notorious mafia crime that's happened. They insert themselves in things they don't know about. They fucking read mob books and insert themselves in infamous crimes, and it's bullshit. So I don't want to totally dog, what these people are producing. But the problem is when I watch a 1.5-minute clip of a preview and all I see is rats, I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, I don't even want to watch it now because I know that I'm being spoon-fed bullshit. But I will say a positive about it because I think that it's not totally negative, but it looks like they're going to cover it from the government's aspect against the mafia. So that point of view may be interesting, but from the rats' point of view, I can't stomach this shit. I really can't, because I know they're going to lie. I mean, I watched a 1.5-minute clip and saw 2 rats lying off the bat. So there you go. That's what it is. I'm sure people are going to watch it and love it and enjoy it, and that's fine. You're entitled to that. But I think you also have to, especially in the day and age of fake media, fake news media, and all this bullshit, I think you need to be careful what you're spoon-fed. And if you just took 10 minutes to do your research, you'll find that I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you the truth. All right. I don't believe he did. However, did Carlo Gambino spend time in social clubs? If so, what was his spot? I doubt it, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe back in the day when he was in his early 20s, he might have. But, once he sort of begins his ascent to becoming a boss, I don't think so. I know that he would hold court at a legit coffee cafe, which wasn't a mob-run place during the day, but it wasn't a social club as we know them today. And I couldn't really tell you the name of any club that he may or may not have gone to. Carlo, by nature, was a guy that laid low. And I just think the reality of Carlo Gambino getting caught in a social club just is probably non-existent. But that's a good question. That's one I've never gotten before. All right. How did Ron Previty shake down people? Did he threaten to sit on them or something? Your thoughts. So, according to Ron Previty, if you listen to any of the stupid fucking interviews he did, he says, I'd smack people around. But, to avoid getting smacked by Ron Previty, all you got to do is run around in circles for 2 minutes, and Ron would have collapsed out of breath. He was so fat. And I really don't know why any of his alleged victims just didn't try that technique. Listen, it's like anything else. For a guy to shake down anybody, he's got to be feared in some kind of way, some kind of sense. Do I believe that he shook down all these people? No. Do I believe that he fucking stole people's bullshit out of fucking hotel rooms? Sure, I believe that. I think that's really how Ron Previty really brokered a lot of money. I think that's how he did it. And I think the FBI was paying, what do you say, $1 million or some shit? So, you figure he's lying about that number. So he probably cut that down to like 300,000. But, listen, I don't believe that Ron Previty walked in anywhere and shook anybody fucking down. If he had the ability to even do that, it would have been because of the fear of other people involved in Philadelphia, not Ron Previty. I mean, that's just my 2 cents. I could be wrong about it, but like I said, you want to avoid Ron Previty, run around in circles for 2 minutes and watch him have a fucking heart attack for fucking walking more than 12 paces in 10 seconds. He couldn't do it. All right, John Cass, longtime conservative columnist, political reporter of the Chicago Tribune, wrote an article today on Chicago's murderous gangs and killings in black neighborhoods. He made a reference as he was making points within the article that Paul Rico was the boss behind Al Capone. Any possibility of that? Yeah, that's 100% true. A lot of people bring up Sam Giancana, and a lot of people think that Sam Giancana was really the boss of bosses in Chicago, and that really wasn't the case. Giancana was a front guy for Paul Rico. That's true. That's always been true. And we know what happened to Giancana and why it happened. But absolutely, Paul Rico was actually the head fucker in charge of that. And he was behind Al Capone. Yeah. All right. Wiggs Galleone's son, Froggy Galleone, joined the Lucchese family, I believe. What was his outcome? Last time I remember he caught a case. Is he out? Is he still good? Listen, Froggy's an alleged member of the Lucchese crime family. He made his bones whacking out Gus Faraci. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because his father, Ralph Galleone, was the guy who actually killed James McBratney, not John Gotti. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that particular situation, without going down a huge fucking rabbit trail here, Carlo Gambino's nephew, Manny Gambino, was kidnapped. One of the things that Jimmy McBratney was doing was he was kidnapping gangsters, holding them for ransom, and collecting ransom money. I believe Robert Center, who was Anthony Center's cousin, I think it's his cousin, was involved in that. I could be wrong about the cousin thing. Maybe it was an uncle, but Robert Center was involved in the Gambino crime family. He was partners with Jimmy McBratney. This is why I don't understand, because Robert Center was involved in, and by the way, Anthony Center's real last name is Sente, Sente. Get anglicized when they came to this country, so a lot of people report that wrong, but yeah, it was actually Sente, Sente. And so basically, more or less, the the roundabout way of putting this is Jimmy McBratney and Robert Center were working together, kidnapping gangsters, relatives of gangsters, and holding them for ransom. Normally, they didn't kill them. Normally, they just collected the money and they just let him go. But in the case of Manny Gambino, they didn't. They fucking collected the money and then they killed him, which is what led Carlo Gambino to losing his shit and wanting Jimmy McBratney dead. Why they allowed Robert Center to get involved with Roy DeMeo after the fact, considering that he was an associate of the Gambino crime family. I don't know why he got a pass. I really have never understood that. He should have been killed as well because he was involved in it. But the end result is Ralph Galleone was contracted to kill Jimmy McBratney. And that's what he did. A lot of people have credited John Gotti with killing Jimmy McBratney, and that's not the case. Gotti did take a pinch for that, but that's because Gotti was in the bar when it happened, but Gotti was not the shooter in that case. It was Ralph Galleone, who pretty much pulled out a fucking fake police badge, tried to lure McBratney out of the bar. McBratney wasn't going to have it, so Ralph Galleone pops him. That's how it went down. John Gotti is always credited with that, and that's not the case. Gotti was not the shooter in that case. Anyway, back in 1996, Froggy Galleone and 39 others were indicted in Brooklyn on charges of running a cocaine ring, and it was alleged by the feds at the time that Froggy was the de facto leader of the gang, and the feds have always alleged that they were pulling in roughly $100,000 a week, which anytime the feds come out with a number, it's usually higher than that. Typically, like the Lufthansa heist, they say it was $5 million. I think it was more than that because the feds always dumb down what was robbed because they don't want to make the company look like a fucking bunch of imbeciles. So anytime there's a robbery, they don't put out the real amount of money that was ripped off. It's usually a lot higher than what they're admitting to, at least publicly. So if the feds alleged they were pulling in $100,000 a week, it was probably closer to $150,000, $200,000 a week. But anyway, Galleone would be pinched for murder, firearms charges, and drug trafficking. It would be sentenced to 22 years. He was released in 2015, and I do not know if Froggy Galleone is still in the streets. That's not a name I hear very often at all. But you just have to logically assume some guys get out, they go right back to the way of life. He was a prolific earner, so I don't think it's any stretch to imagine that Froggy Galleone is back in the streets. All right. Let's say there's a capo who is the biggest earner in his respective family. If he were to become boss, would he keep all his rackets and continue to profit and manage them, or would he give those rackets to a crew member for them to run and now profit off of, since the boss will have a huge money flow anyway? I mean, listen, you always got to spread the wealth, right? So it's, I tend to look at it like this. So most likely the captain that would hand over his rackets to somebody else to handle for him, and the money would just keep pouring in. A boss is going to hand the rackets to a capo who has the capacity to earn and manage. He's not going to give it to a dummy. He wouldn't just hand it off to anybody. That was one of the issues that Paul Castellano had, is that he handed off illegal enterprises to others and expected the same cut he was getting when he was running them himself, i.e. Neil Delacroce, who really took over all the loan sharking and the gambling in the area. Whereas most bosses in that situation are going to take less because the sheer amount of volume that is going to come in from all the other rackets is 10 times what they were getting just when they were running one racket. It's saying that, okay, I'm going to give up this racket. I'm going to give it to Neil. Neil's going to give me a lower percentage than I was making before because I got 50, 60 rackets I'm collecting on. The problem with Paul Castellano was he wanted the same fucking cut. And then he raises, a typical 10% to like 15%. And so guys are starting to lose more and more and more. So then obviously they're going to start lying about the amount of money that they're actually bringing in, which makes sense. Another thing that Paul Castellano did, which was different from a lot of bosses, is that he acted that he was a legitimate businessman, and he took meetings with Fortune 500 guys, which was a huge mistake. That idea itself, wasn't totally bad, but the ramifications of all of those decisions came back to haunt him. And he wasn't Russell Buffalino. I mean, that's the case. But listen, anytime a captain's got a lot of money going on, he's going to move up the ladder and he's going to hand it off. He's not giving it away. He's still going to take his cut. But I think logically that you're going to take a little bit less of a cut because you got a lot more money coming in. Because when you're a captain, let's say you've got 5 rackets, right? All right, you're going to collect off of them 5 rackets and then you're going to kick up to the fucking top. The thing is, when you become a boss, now you're getting a percentage of everything that's going on. I mean, fucking everything, from every nickel and dime drug deal to fucking loan sharking, whatever the case may be, bid rigging, construction rackets, union rackets, whatever it is. So I think that logically, and I could be wrong, but I think logically you take less of a cut of a certain racket, you give it to somebody who can continue to function that business and make you money. See, this is the reason why guys like Sammy Gravano, when they came along, they were able to take, and he's a fucking awful, fucking horrible reference for this point, but Sammy Gravano had 50, 60 rackets going on. He didn't need to be boss. He didn't need the extra money. You look at guys like Jimmy Burke, for example. Jimmy Burke takes over William Benvena's fucking rackets. He gets out of prison. He wants his rackets back. Jimmy's made them more profitable for the Lucchese's and for the Gambino crime family. And so therefore the Gambinos aren't going to back Billy Bats getting all pissed off and wanting his rackets back because they're making 10 times what they were when he was out. So Billy Bats bitches, he bemoans, he goes and complains, and Jimmy kills him for it. So that's the point, is that Jimmy took over a bunch of rackets, made them more profitable. When you become somebody that has the capacity to earn and take something that's making $20,000 and it makes $100,000, why is the Mafia going to step in then and tell you, well, I know you ran the rackets, but the problem is this guy's out, he wants his racket back. So what? So they can go from making $100,000 back to 20? Fuck out of here with that. So that's typically from at least my perspective how things operate. All right, back in the 50s to the early 80s, when black street gangs actually had structure, back when Hoover and Ford were on okay, maybe this is a typo, were on the streets. Did the outfit take a cut from everything they had control over, or did they do business with them, or did the outfit just control them in some kind of way? I would largely assume, and this is going to be based on a time period, that they got a cut out of everything going on in the city, but that would have changed like in the 1970s. The mob, at least from that perspective, lost its foothold into the inner city back then, especially here in New York. Like once the crack epidemic really started here in the 80s, them shaking down little tiny drug dealers just stopped. Smaller places like Providence, like Philadelphia, they still took a cut, but bigger cities like New York and Chicago really lost a foothold in the 80s, like I said, when crack sort of started and all of that kind of stuff. But the reality is that I think, prior to 1950 through the 60s, probably right around the mid-70s is when that would have stopped. Just because right around 1980, 81, the crack epidemic starts here in New York. I don't know when that started in Chicago, but I would largely assume it was the same time period. They lost control of neighborhoods. And that's just, unfortunately, the reality of it is that, you might be able to control a Nicky Barnes. You might be able to control a Frank Lucas. But past that, no, it's just not going to happen. All right. Congratulations on the announcement of a new platform. I just hope you're not shortchanging yourself because your content is one of a kind, and the time you put into this show, you will never get back. You have to protect your stuff so third parties can't use it. Like you said, I hope you found a way to make a decent living doing what you like to do. I'm a big Mob fan and Penguins fan as well. I'd like to come onto the show and talk about both subjects. You know more about the Mob than I do, and I have thousands of hours of reading, so I can only imagine the time you've put into this thing. Much love from Big Ron in the Berg. God, I hope you're not fucking Ron Previty's ghost. Ron Previty's ghost and Joey Merlino. Listen, I'm not going to change who I am for anybody or anything. It's not going to change how I approach things. Like I said, the only major change is going to be is I'm not going to address the bullshitters, the haters. It's pointless. And the platform I'm going to be on is very big, very professional, surrounded by the biggest names in the entertainment industry. And so I'm going to have to change how I engage idiots. But I'm still going to crack rats over the head here and there. Like with anything, you change a little bit here, but I'm still going to be a venomous prick, and I'm still going to defend my friends. I mean, that's never going to fucking change, ever. That is my first order of business is to educate you people a little bit about the streets. Second order of business is to defend my friends, and that's never going to stop. All right. I can't find my earlier comments, so I'm going to repeat this question. I read that Carmine Galante and Neil Della Croce had the coldest, most murderous stares. Who do you think had the coldest, scariest stares? I think those two are probably at the top. I think Anthony Center sort of had the same stare. I think Tommy Patera has the same stare. Look, some guys are just wired not to look at you while they speak to you, but they look through you. I've said this before. There's been some people that I've met in my life where, you know, they just kind of got a look about them. It's not a look that they're fucking psychotic. It's they don't look at you. They look through you. It's the only thing. Some people that listen to this show may understand what I'm saying, and they may not. I mean, you'll know it when you see it. You know, you could tell a killer from a bullshitter. Killers have a certain kind of look, and it, like I said, it's hard to explain, but it's like looking into somebody's eyes. You don't see the light behind their eyes. It's dark. There's no reflection. Listen, I've met a lot of guys who have that look, and while they're friendly enough, you know, you just know that if you get with them, you get about 3 feet of wiggle room with them. And maybe if you catch them on a good day, you can talk your way out of a problem that you might have with them. But if you fuck them over, if you disrespect them, they will kill you without hesitation. And so those sort of situations that I've been in is you just recognize who they are. You don't have to kiss nobody's ass. That's not how it works. But you just know that you have 3 feet of wiggle room with them. You know, you can't be a gossiper. You can't be a bullshitter. You can't be a drama guy. You can't be a trouble starter. You mind your business. If you mind your business, nobody's ever going to fuck with you like that. But you will know them when you meet them because they have a look. They have a way that they carry themselves that, you know, it's like the thing with the flag with the snakes says, don't tread on me. That they basically wear that without even having to fucking wear it. You just look at them. They have a look. They're about business. They're serious people. Listen, I've met guys that are like the nicest guys in the fucking world. But if you push them into a corner, you're going to find out that they're one of the most cold, murderous people you're ever going to meet in your life. And so I think, you know, I think I know what this person's talking about because there have been FBI guys that have said that Neil Della Croce had a look that just terrified them. Listen, there are guys that look that way. You know, there are guys that look that way and aren't that way. But then there are guys who come with a smirk and a knife and a gun behind their back. It's just how it works. So, you know, yeah, I've met people like that. You know, a lot of people ask me how the fuck I sleep at night. I sleep very well. What the fuck am I worried about? All right. Was Enrico Temo made in both the Bonanno and Patriarcha crime families? If not the Patriarcha crime family, why would he be the underboss of one family and made into another? Is there a history of guys holding upper management seats in one family but being a man of honor in another family? You know, Temo was the boss, the underboss of the Patriarcha crime family. He was also alleged to be a made guy in the Bonanno crime family. Listen, there's been many instances where guys have, you know, been into crime families. Vito Rizzuto was the boss of his own family and a captain in the Bonannos. I don't know why anybody would want to do that, but I suspect that it probably has a lot more to do with money than anything. I know that's not tradition, but it has happened. Money is always going to be the root. There was a history of this sort of thing happening. Like Russell Buffalino was the boss of his own family and at one time ran the Bonannos until they could install the boss and until they could get situated doing what they wanted to do. But could you imagine, and I have a question for you guys, imagine if one boss, say Carlo Gambino, Joey Merlino, fucking Al Capone, whoever, take a boss. Imagine if there wasn't 5 crime families and Gambino ran 2 crime families. How would that work? I've always wondered that. So what I want you guys to do is go to Facebook, send me a message, and just tell me what boss, you know, what you would think as far as what boss could run 2 crime families at the same time. And what crime families would you merge? If you could merge the Bonannos and the let's say we merge the Bonannos and the Gambinos and Carlo Gambino's the boss. How would that work out? So give me your ideas on which mob families should merge, how that would work out, and who would run things. So just play the different options. Let me know. I think that's quite intriguing. And what I'll do on the next show is I'll talk about some of the things that you guys send me. All right. How accurate was Jimmy Gandolfini's portrayal as a mafia boss? Who of all the cast was legitimately the most gangster of the bunch? What do you think of the HBO film that's coming out next year, The Many Saints of Newark? Okay, I've talked about The Many Saints of Newark a couple of different times, but for the most part, yeah, I thought Jimmy Gandolfini did a great job. Was it accurate? I mean, in a way, yes. I think if he truly was going to portray himself as a Jersey boss, yeah, that was pretty close. I think the idea of a guy going to a shrink probably is not going to happen. I think they would have killed him. That's ultimately the truth there. I also think, too, that the one mistake that The Sopranos made was not including Philadelphia in that. And the reason why I say that is, New Jersey, Philly has inroads into Jersey. Jersey has inroads into Philly as well. And I think that the juxtaposition of, first of all, Philly Attardo being a New York guy, Johnny Sacramone being a New York guy, where was the Jersey side of the Gambinos, or the Jersey side of the Lucchese's, or the Jersey side of the Genovese crime family? And I think if you would put Philadelphia in that, you really could have made some interesting story arcs. I'll be honest with you. Nobody's ever really done a Philadelphia organized crime type of show, or really or included them in some of the things. And not to be a spoiler alert, but I am working on something that sort of has something to do with that. I don't want to get into all of that right now, but there is something that is sort of being talked about, something that is being worked on about that. I don't know if anything is going to come out of that, but I am working on something like that I think is going to be pretty interesting. There's some documentary stuff that I've been approached on. But like I said, I don't get into a whole lot of different things like that, but there's a lot of offers to do a lot of cool stuff. But we'll see what happens. But as far as the most gangster of the cast, probably Tony Sirico, to be honest with you. I mean, he's got the most legit past as being a thug and a gangster, so there you go. As far as how many Saints in Newark, this is a tough one for me. And the reason why is because I know the backstory of this, and it takes place during a bunch of race riots, and I don't like that aspect of it. I just think that, and I understand that a lot of this is about, Tony Soprano growing up as a kid, how he gets into the life, those, sort of surrounded by him, Dickie Moltisanti and all of these guys. And I'm just not sure if I like the backdrop of the film. I just... anytime you have like race riots as the backdrop of your film, I wonder which direction you're going to go. But, Jimmy Gandolfini's son, Michael, is in it. Looks just like his father. So from that aspect, I want to see it, but I just don't, in many ways, I think that David Chase is sort of dipping in the well a little bit. But it is what it is. And, I'm hoping it's not totally based around the race riots of the 60s. I hope that's not the case. If it is, it's not going to work, but we'll see. It's going to be, from what I understand, delayed another year. So here we go. All right. I tried to post this yesterday, but Scotty was still having a trouble fixing the Enterprise's transporter beam. So this is a repeat. Whatever opportunity allows you to pursue yet evolve your personally professional passions and still permit you keeping Mob Talk Radio's independent integrity, it sounds like a hell of a heavenly win-win situation. Yeah, here's the thing. So the one thing that I'll never do is I'm not going to give up the creativity of this. So I'm not going to allow myself to be put into a box. You can't say this, you can't do that. I'm going to continue to do my show the same way I've always done it. It'll change in a couple of different ways, just from the way I approach a couple of things. But as far as independently having integrity, that's never going to change. I think, some people have asked me, and I didn't want to, put this on the air because there's a lot of people that ask, are you still going to defend your friends if you're moving to like a big professional, like celebrity type of platform? And absolutely. Why wouldn't I? I mean, that's a part of what I do. I'm never going to stop defending people. Friendships are important to me. And so if anybody that is my friend calls me a friend and I call them a friend, they got a problem, then I'm going to do what I got to do to help them in any way I can. If they don't want my help, then that's fine too. But anything that I can do, I will do. And I think I've personally put myself on the line multiple times for other people. And whether or not that was reciprocated is something we can argue, but that's life. You can't some people, want your help, they get it, and then they don't humble themselves by somebody putting themselves on the line, and that's just the reality of certain people, certain egos. And that's that. It's not like I dislike anybody that's done that. I just, once that happens with me, I'm done with you, because I can't, try not to go to a rabbit trail here with this one, Jeff. It basically just comes down to, if you put yourself in harm's way, or you put your reputation on the line, or you put yourself in harm's way to help somebody, and then that's not reciprocated, and that's kind of a punk move, and that's what a dog does. And when I meet somebody or get around somebody that's like that, and the same respect and the same adoration that I give you is not returned to me, then I have a tendency to be like, go fuck yourself. And sometimes you got to learn them lessons hard. And it's not just mob talk where that's happened. It's been other things in my life. So, you have to be around people. You've got to surround yourself with people that are going to push back as hard as you push for them. So it's like, if something happens to me and I got a problem, and if I call somebody that I consider my friend, that says, oh, I'm a friend, anything you need, let me know. And I call them and I say, listen, this is my problem, I need a little help. And they fucking bullshit me, then I know that they're not loyal people, and I just stay the fuck away from them. And you have that happen all the time in life. It's happened to me, and so you just, you don't shit talk the person, you don't say bad things about them, you just say fuck them, and you move on from life. And so, it is what it is. All right, has there ever been a zip that made it to a higher rank than just a soldier or bodyguard within the five families, such as a capo, consigliere, underboss, etc.? Well, I mean, look, Gambino was a zip. So what does that tell you? Gambino was brought over to America by the Castellanos. The Castellanos were big criminals prior to Gambino's arrival. But if you're talking about in terms of saying like Furio Junta, then Cesar Bonaventure is exactly the guy we should talk about. Carmine Galante brings him over to America to really become a hitman. And he would actually end up becoming the official underboss in the Bonanno of the Sicilians in that family. So, yeah, it's happened. And it's, you look at the Gambino crime family, and they have whole entire crews that are Sicilian, and so we're seeing a little bit of a transfer in some families. But in terms of a zip coming over, Cesar Bonaventure is probably the one guy that I could think off the top of my head. All right, is it true that Paul Vario was one of the top earners of the Lucchese crime family, and how much power did Paulie really have? Listen, Paul Vario was a fucking earner. There's no way around getting around that. I don't think he earned... I mean, maybe at one point, Paulie, first of all, he was the best earner in that crime family at the time, okay? But a lot of that has to do with Jimmy Burke as well. And that's exactly why Paul Vario always protected Jimmy Burke. Take Jimmy Burke away from Paul Vario, and I don't think that Paul Vario has the same amount of cash flow that he did. He still would have had serious cash flow, but Jimmy just brought a lot of money into the family, and Burke was the spoke of the wheel in which it moved. So listen, if you take away the hijacking that they split with the Gambinos at JFK, they wouldn't have had as much cash flow. Where Vario really made his money and garnered power was through the cargo haulers union. He could control investigations. He could lock down certain cargo that they wanted to steal. He controlled all of gambling in East New York. Anybody who dared attempt to do anything in New York, especially East New York, had to give a cut to Paulie. He was a feared guy. He was a smart guy. According to government transcripts, Paul Vario was pulling in $25,000 a day alone from most of his enterprises. But keep in mind that a large percentage of what would have been $25,000 would have been kicked up. I think it was probably more money than $25,000, especially when you consider he controlled all the gambling in East New York. It's probably a lot larger than that. And he probably was the biggest earner for the Lucchese's as well as Jimmy Burke during that time period. But I think that they both sort of needed each other in that respect. Are the terms friend of ours and friend of mine still used on the streets to denote status of somebody being introduced? And where did this originate? I think it goes back to the 50s more than anything. Guys needed a way to identify who was with who without mentioning a name, without mentioning whether a guy was made or not. But to my knowledge, though, I think it's mostly Hollywood bullshit. I'll be honest with you. I have never in my life ever heard a mob guy say, yeah, this is a friend of mine, this is a friend of yours. I've never heard any of that shit in my life. It never comes out of their mouths. Because usually that would be in front of an outsider, right? And these guys aren't going to, I think it's Hollywood bullshit. I don't think there's a gang. You think John Gotti ran around going, hey, he's a friend of ours, a friend of mine? You think Joey Merlino runs around saying that, or fucking Vinny the Chin Gigante, or any of those guys ever said that? I don't think so. But what I do tend to hear these days is people will say, this guy's a gentleman, this guy's with us. And it really depends where you are, too. What they may say in New York is different than what they say in Philadelphia, different than what they say in Chicago or Rhode Island. It just really depends where you're at, like location-wise. But most of the time, most of what I hear, most made guys know who's made, who isn't, so they don't need to distinguish that in front of everybody, and they're not going to introduce a fucking associate to a fucking captain. They're just not going to do that. It's not like a flyer needs to go out to confirm and deny who's who. So a lot of the time I hear the gentleman thing. He's a gentleman. Being a gentleman has a lot of different connotations. It could mean that a guy's made. It could mean a guy is a stand-up guy. A guy is with us. He's like us. But most of the time, a gentleman can mean like what? It's like forget about it, right? Forget about it means like 10 fucking things. A gentleman means a bunch of different things. So it just depends on how it's said, where it's said, and who's actually saying it. All right, did the Columbos, Bonanno, or Lucchese ever have someone who was boss at a commission like Vinny the Chin, Big Paul, or Carlo Gambino, or like Luciano, or Vito Genovese? Or was it always just the Genoveses and Gambinos? One exception probably to that would be Joey Massino. Massino at one point was the head of the entire Mafia, and this would have been after John Gotti, was locked away for the rest of his life, and Gotti was never the head of the entire Mafia. He might have thought he was, but Vinny the Chin was really the bigger of the two in terms of being able to demand and control, not to knock Gotti in any sense of the imagination. But the one guy that John Gotti did not want to fuck with was Vinny the Chin. He said disparaging things about him on wiretaps and stuff like that, but that was not something that Vinny the Chin or, Gotti was not going to say it to his face. And that's just the truth of the matter. And I think that Vinny the Chin was really the bigger of the two in terms of being able to demand and being able to control the flow of things. Granted, Joey Massino was a snitch fuck. But the one thing that he did was incredibly smart. And he shut down all the social clubs. Captains couldn't meet anybody. He just, he wanted everything to be isolated. He wanted to sort of isolate himself from everybody. And I think it was a great idea. But I think, had Joey Massino not gone bad, he probably would have been one of the most powerful mob bosses of his generation for the time. I think he still would. I mean, likelihood would be he'd end up in fucking prison. But he was really starting to align himself as somebody that was incredibly strong and powerful. And he had, he had power and he had respect from a lot of different people. But, we know what happened. But short of Vinny the Chin, no. It was always pretty much the Gambinos of the Genovese crime family. All right, had Vito Genovese never been convicted for murder and never fled back to Italy to avoid the charge, which was a murder charge, by the way, do you think Luciano would have made Genovese acting boss? If so, would that mean that Albert Anastasia would have been never hit, since Genovese wouldn't have approached Gambino, essentially furthering Gambino's chances of being boss? This is a great question. Look, do I think that Genovese would have become acting boss? Absolutely. I think he would have. I don't have any doubts about that. Because what happens is when he flees to Italy, at the time he was the number two. He was the underboss of the crime family. And when he came back, he comes back wanting to retain his standing. And by that time, fucking Frank Costello, who had already taken over. And so there was no way that they were going to allow Genovese to take off, come back, and lead the crime family, which is what created all that drama between him and Luciano to begin with. The one thing Genovese knew is that Costello was more of a piecemeal type of guy whose value was in politics and government. Costello was a killer in the early days, don't get me wrong, but he transformed sort of into a Tom Hagen versus a Sonny Corleone. As far as Anastasia goes, I'm not sure that would be entirely the case. Look, Genovese as a boss would have wanted to take over the entire Mafia. His ego wouldn't have allowed any less than that. So I tend to think that there would have been probably a war regardless between different crime families at that point. But he wouldn't have needed Gambino if he had ascended in the normal sort of way. So if he doesn't flee to Italy, I still think he does become boss. But Luciano probably doesn't get fucked in his ass if Genovese doesn't go. So there's a lot of different things. So if Genovese doesn't drop a dime on Luciano being in Cuba, which basically gets Luciano shelved at the end of the fucking day, there's a lot to be said for that. So if Genovese just succeeds the normal way, then I think things would have been fine. But his ego wouldn't have allowed him to just be a boss. He wanted to control everything. And so when Luciano starts to realize some of Genovese's nerve and what he's trying to do, they play tiddlywinks with each other, and Genovese drops a dime on Luciano, basically getting him shelved from the mob. If that doesn't happen, Luciano probably stays in Cuba and runs his crime family for another, 10, 20 years, 15 years, maybe 10, 15 years. But we're never going to know because it went down another path. So we can play every single sort of narrative here. But I think, if Genovese does not take off to Italy, first of all, if he doesn't take off, he's going to end up doing time anyway. He's going to probably get the fucking electric chair because they needed time to bribe people. They needed time for him to sort of help the war effort. In World War II, he joined the military. We've been through his whole entire life story. So at the end of the day, there's so many different variables that we can fucking play with that. But even if he doesn't go to Italy, he's going to take the pinch for the murder. So in many ways, him taking off to Italy was the one thing that he had to do. He had no fucking choice. It's just everything he did after the fact when he came back is what caused all the problems. All right, there has been some conflicting information about the remnants of the La Cosa Nostra crew in Baltimore. Originally strictly Gambino, but now Philadelphia. Same group, different crew. To my knowledge, it was always a Gambino sort of front. It was not big. It was very small. But would it shock me if somebody told me Philadelphia guys were actively running that? No, wouldn't shock me. I mean, at least from a fringe aspect. Especially when you think of territory. It's not far from Philadelphia. I remember when I lived in Pennsylvania, I was like 45 minutes from Baltimore. So I mean, it's closer than New York, right? So it would make sense territory wise. And Philly just isn't in Philadelphia. I mean, a lot of people think that Philly's just Philly and they're in Philly, but they're not. There are maybe crews, maybe associates in other territories. You'd be a fool to think that they were just going to put themselves in fucking a 90 square mile radius. It's just not the case. I'm not going to divulge those areas even if I knew them. But would it shock me? No, it wouldn't shock me if anybody was in Baltimore. But what the fuck? I mean, they can't control the fucking unions there. They can't. I don't even think there is unions in Baltimore. I could be wrong about that, but that's like saying, okay, New York guys are just in New York, and that's not the case either. They're everywhere. So I mean, you're always going to have contacts, associates, business partners in any other place. So it's just it's just the reality of it. All right, did the K&A gang out of Northeast Philly ever work with or against the Philly mob? I'm assuming Bruno would have been boss at the time. I think initially, yeah, probably, but they were their own entity. They would likely have worked probably in unison with Angelo Bruno, but listen, they had ties to a bunch of different people, Jewish gangsters, the Greek mob, even to Nicky Scarfo, and even the Genovese crime family. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that, pretty much when Scarfo became boss, they definitely had to kick up to him, but they probably had a more relaxed organization, at least with the Mafia under Bruno. But that's, I don't know a lot about the K. I mean, I know some about the K&A gang, but I'm not proficient in knowing everything about them. All right, 2 questions. How full of shit is Gianni Russo? I watched an interview with him on Vlad TV. The second question is, I was watching a video and they were saying that Matty Madonna was Nicky Barnes' main supplier. Any truth to this? First of all, Gianni Russo is completely full of shit in every single way. And yes, Matty Madonna, at least according to the feds, was the one who supplied Nicky Barnes. That is about as accurate as it gets if we're going to believe what the feds allege. Gianni Russo would have you believe that he was fucking Frank Costello's bodyguard. That's a fucking lie. He would have you believe that he slit somebody's throat with a bottle. He'd have you believe that. He would have you believe at 13 years old that Marilyn Monroe fucked him. This guy is full of shit. He's been in one fucking goddamn film. He's been living off of that notoriety his whole entire life. He claims to have had all these restaurants all throughout the world. He's claimed to be a chef. He's claimed to be Liberace's fucking toenail cleaner. He's claimed to be Liberace's fucking jeweler. He knows where Jimmy Hoffa's buried. He knows where the Lost Colony is in fucking North Carolina. He knows where the fucking Blackbeard's treasure is buried. Fuck him and everybody that looks like him. The guy's a fucking nothing. He's never been a nothing, never been a nothing but the Godfather. He's lived off them coattails his whole fucking life, and he's just telling nonsense. And that's what we've seen. And I don't know if it's the fucking COVID fucking 19 bullshit or what it is, but all these motherfuckers are coming out the fucking woodwork, making up the craziest shit I've ever fucking heard. None of it's realistic. None of it's valid. And Gianni Russo's just fucking keeping himself, what is he, 86? He looks like he's 86. He's just trying to keep his name going. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you lie consistently and constantly, it's stupid to me. Why anybody pays attention? This guy's a fucking nothing. Frank Costello, please. Just do the age. Listen, if you don't want to believe anything I say, look at Frank Costello's birth date, death date, his age, do Gianni Russo's age, and just try to put it together. Why the fuck is Frank Costello going to bring in Gianni Russo to do anything with him? Fuck out of here. It's stupid, but this is what these people always do. They always put themselves with famous people, and they always do it with people that are dead. You know, nobody ever talks about anybody that's alive. It's always somebody that's fucking dead. I don't believe a word the guy says. Listen, he's in the final home stretch of his life. I think he's 80 fucking whatever. I don't give a fuck how old he is. Fuck him. But you know, he's in the final stretch of his life. Let him enjoy it. Let him have some fun with it. But don't take it seriously. This is a guy that was on screen for all of fucking 8 minutes of The Godfather, gets his ass whipped in one fucking scene, gets killed in another, and what? He's fucking Al Pacino now? Fuck you. Ugh. All right. I was a fairly good friend of Anthony Brooklier, who committed suicide a couple years ago. For those of you that don't know, Anthony Brooklier was a very, very famous lawyer in, I believe, L.A., defended a lot of serious people. His father was allegedly the boss of the Los Angeles Mafia by the name of Dominic Brooklier. So the question is, he never talked about his father. What can you tell us about his father, Dominic? So Brooklier got his start with Mickey Cohen in the 40s as Cohen was taking over the gambling rackets. He would pretty much eventually defect to the Dragna crime family under Jack Dragna. It would get inducted in the Mafia around 1947. Dragna actually attempted, believe it or not, to have Cohen killed a dozen or so times, and Brooklier was the shooter one of those times, but he botched the hit as Cohen was coming out of a restaurant. Brooklier would then get into a loan sharking partnership with Jimmy Fradiano, who was bringing in a lot of money. Brooklier was such a prolific earner that it garnered him a promotion to captain, and then he would move on to control all of Orange County. Then in 1974, he would become the underboss of the Dragna crime family right after Joe DiPolito died. Then in 1974, boss Nick Licata would keel over dead, and Brooklier would take over as boss. Then in 1975, Brooklier begins to have a couple of issues, mainly with Frank Bompensero, who would attempt to sort of circumvent Brooklier's leadership. Brooklier then sort of begins to distrust Bompensero, and for good reason. And he wants Bompensero dead. Brooklier would contract out the hit, but Bompensero, who was a prolific hitman himself, just didn't make himself an easy target. And what Brooklier would do then would be to promote Bompensero to consigliere in an effort to sort of ease him into feeling comfortable. It's an easier way to get somebody, easier way to kill him. But the problem, which Brooklier didn't know at the time, was that Bompensero was an informant for the FBI. Bompensero would talk Brooklier into shaking down a company called Forex, and that company was a bullshit company that was producing porn films. Forex was actually run and sort of a made-up company by the FBI, and it was designed by the FBI to lure Brooklier in. And so then what begins to happen on the streets is there's sort of guys talking that Bompensero might be a rat, and that the feds were pretty much onto them. And so Brooklier absolutely at this point wants him dead. And he goes to Jimmy Fradiano, who ends up contracting to hit out to Thomas Riccardi. Bompensero would be killed days later while standing in a phone booth. Eventually, Brooklier would get hemmed up in some charges and allowed Fradiano to take over as boss. And then Fradiano pretty much begins to purge the crime family, and he begins to try to win over captains because he wants to push Brooklier out of the family. And as Brooklier begins to sort of suspect that this is going on, and it's very reminiscent of what happened with the Colombo with Carmine Persico. There were some issues with Carmine Persico and Wild Bill Cutolo. Persico kind of felt that Cutolo was undermining him, trying to take a run, and that's why they killed him. And I have always questioned whether that was something that Carmine Persico really felt, or whether that was something that fucking Greg Scarpa just made up, because Greg Scarpa manipulated everybody, and maybe I don't want to go down that fucking rabbit hole, but eventually so Brooklier starts to think that Fradiano's sort of trying to uproot him. And so Brooklier wants Fradiano killed. The problem was feds began to hear whispers on the street that Fradiano's death was coming. There was a couple wiretaps. So the FBI goes and tells Fradiano, and what does he do? He becomes a fucking rat, and he ends up implicating Brooklier in the 1977 murder of Pompinzero. Eventually, the law would catch up to Brooklier, and he would be charged with extortion, murder, and racketeering. He would be found guilty of everything but murder, which he was acquitted of, but it also ensured him that he would actually get out of prison. He would be sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, but unfortunately for Brooklier, he would die of a massive heart attack just 6 months shy of getting out. So that was sort of Brooklier's life. The mere fact that, he died a couple of months shy of getting out is fucking sad, because who knows what he could have done. But it's one of these things where we've seen this. History always repeats itself, right? So one of the things that we've seen in organized crime, I mean specifically in organized crime, is guys that want to be at the top are willing to do everything to do it. And then they do this stab you in the back kind of technique. They go to captains they're friendly with. Oh, could you see if maybe I took over? And then they back people. And then guys end up becoming rats. And that's just kind of how it works out. Especially if you look at the fuck Carmine Persico, in that situation with Wild Bill Cutolo. And Greg Scarpa, I think early on, and I'm going to say this for the record because there will be people that will call me on this, but I think early on, I think that from what I was able to hear from other people, I may or may not have sort of described Bill Cutolo the wrong way. There were things that were going on and a lot of different moving parts. And I originally had thought that Wild Bill was being subversive and making moves, but I really now, I think I did that show 4.5 years ago, but I think now looking at it, I think a lot of what happened to Wild Bill was kind of fucked up, because I don't think that he was necessarily talking out of line. He was a guy on the street making a ton of fucking money. He's, this is an up and coming guy who really had the balls, and he really had the acumen of being a boss. But the problem is he had Greg Scarpa in the way, and Greg Scarpa was really double talking everybody. And I think that's honestly, I think, Carmine Persico by nature wanted to control that family with an iron fist. I obviously, Wild Bill doesn't get killed without Carmine Persico ordering it. But at the same time, I think that Carmine Persico, other than having an ego and wanting to have a death grip on the crime family, which he's in his right to do, I think allowed Greg Scarpa to really fucking put things in his head that weren't accurate. And when you're in jail and you have nothing else to hear, but this guy's moving against you, that guy's moving against you, what are you going to do? And so I think from that perspective, while Carmine Persico may or may not have ordered the death of Wild Bill, I think that the one person that is responsible for that is fucking Greg Scarpa. I'm just saying. That's my opinion. Other people may disagree with me, but that's my opinion. All right. How many made men and associates were convicted with Gennaro Angelo when Whitey Bulger ratted them out with wiretaps? Since he had many brothers, how was his crew constructed? Was he the first capo of the brothers, then the underboss? First of all, the Angelos bought their way into the fucking mafia. They didn't earn it the way anybody else did. They bought their fucking way into the mob. They didn't earn it like everybody else. They paid an entrance fee, which I don't understand why Ray Patriarca did that, but I also know that Ray Patriarca never trusted them either, just because of that very reason. The Angelos were a joke. I'm sorry, that's probably going to offend a lot of people, but as far as I'm concerned, they didn't have the pedigree whatsoever. They, did a lot of stupid shit. These, the guys that are in charge of Providence now are straight up gangsters. I'm not going to mention two names, but there is a guy in Providence that I don't care what anybody fucking says. He's the fucking man. He's a smart guy. He's the guy that should be the guy, and he is the guy as far as I'm concerned. But there's two of them. Also I want to say too, for the record, Whitey Bulger never taped anybody. He never wore a fucking tape. They never caught anybody on a phone with Whitey Bulger on a wiretap. None of that's true. In fact, in the collection of his 700 pages, which I have, and we're talking 700 pages of 302s, the Angelos were not mentioned once by name. Not one person was mentioned in any detail in a crime, according to the paperwork that I have. So if Whitey Bulger, and I'm not defending what he did, but what I'm saying to you is that Whitey Bulger did not. So let me rephrase this. So Whitey Bulger had not one time sat down with John Connolly and said, okay, there was a murder on Modena Ave in Providence. Fucking Jerry Angelo was behind it, and he whacked this bum, that bum, this bum. He never said anything like that in 700 fucking pages of 302s, which technically, if you, and I don't want to go to a rabbit trail with this because I'm going to talk about this at length on the new show on the new platform, is that at the end of the day, a 302 for somebody that was that the government is alleged was an informant for 20 years. That 302 is not going to be 700 pages. We're talking 60, 70,000 pages, and they aren't going to repeat themselves. So, like I said, I'm not saying he didn't rat. I'm not defending him. What I'm saying to you is we're going to have this conversation in another fucking show. Absolutely 100%. And I will get into that on another show, but not once was he ever fucking caught on any wiretaps giving up anybody's name. So I don't know where that's coming from. Maybe it was because of the videotape that the state police took of the Angelos meeting with Whitey Bulger at the garage. I think it was off Lawrence Street or some shit like that in Boston. But that was the state police. That was not the FBI, and that's how other federal agents found out that there was something fucking fishy going on in Boston. So yeah, that would be that. Yeah, so I need to take a break really quick, and I got to apologize for this. I've never done this before, but I've got a call I've got to take. So stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio. We'll be back to wrap up the show. All right, welcome back on Mob Talk Radio. I apologize for that. That's never happened before. I'm not going to let it happen again either. All right, do you consider Tony Soprano a rat? He did turn on those two Middle Eastern guys that hung out at the Bada Bing. And if the Sopranos did not end, do you think the New York families would have whacked out Tony because he did kill a boss without permission? And what is your favorite Frank Vincent character in movies? Mine was while he was on The Sopranos and Casino. I don't consider Tony Soprano a rat in any sense, really. I mean, if you look closely, Tony had sort of this like hateful relationship with the feds, but he attempted to help or give some facts, which didn't lead to any arrest. And it was sort of the thing where the FBI posed questions and he figures, well, I'll just bullshit them or tell them, what I do know, and maybe they'll leave us the fuck alone. Also all Tony Soprano did in a sense was placate the feds, gave them small shit, which enabled his family to be left alone. Tony wasn't ratting on his friends, wasn't testifying against people, and he didn't give them anything of consequence. As far as Tony having Philly Tardo killed, what would have happened is that ultimately the commission would have had to have proved Tony ordered it and had it done. If they can't prove that, without that, I don't think New York would even budge. So that's the way I think that would have fucking gone down. Frank Vincent, I'll be honest, I really wasn't a fan of him for a long time, but The Sopranos sort of changed a lot of that for me. He was a gifted actor. And I would have loved to see him do something different besides a mob role because I think he was a good actor. But I think Phil Leotardo was probably my favorite character that he played ever. I still laugh on, I don't know what the Sopranos episode is, where he's bitching and complaining and somebody said that he looked like the fucking Shah of Iran. So there you go. All right. Lucky Luciano, considered by many to be the greatest American gangster ever, actually ratted on someone to get out from under a narcotics charge. Does this diminish his legacy, completely destroy it, or reflect how the Americanized version of gangsters would operate? It's about money. Okay, and he furthers, this person goes on and says, I read a book, The Last Testament of Lucky Luciano, allegedly written by Lucky and Martin Bosch. It's bogus, right? Did he testify against anyone? Did he not get set up by Vito Genovese and expelled from Cuba because Genovese ratted him out to the U.S. government? So more or less, here's my thing. Did Gambino and Costello and Luciano not drop a dime on Genovese? Did Genovese not drop a dime on Lucky Luciano? This is something that these guys did to each other in those days. They whacked bosses. They used cops. They set each other up. There's a huge difference between setting a guy up, which was considered commonplace in those days, versus testifying against somebody for a sentence reduction. Times have changed. Times have completely changed. For instance, they whacked bosses, and John Gotti did the same thing that everybody else did. He did nothing any different than anybody else. Okay, so you can't hold one accountable and not all of them. I think this is more of a reflection of the Americanized version of gangsters in that time period. I do understand that Luciano did write a book was working on a book that created a lot of issues for the mob. But whether or not that is the actual book or the actual words that Luciano spoke, I would not hold that up to be really valid. Luciano had ideas of writing a book, had kind of worked on a couple of different things, but from my knowledge, never sort of finished it. So I think categorically, to say that those are Luciano's words, I can't say that for sure. I think it's probably bullshit. But to my knowledge, I do not know of any instance where Lucky Luciano testified against anybody in court. I think that that's not true. But were there things that these guys did to one another back in the day that are kind of fucked up? Yeah, absolutely. The Costello, Gambino, and fucking Luciano set up Genovese. Genovese fucking got Lucky Luciano expelled from Cuba. This is something that they did, but I think that in terms of being a rat, Lucky Luciano never ever sat on a fucking bench in a fucking court and says, "Yep, he did it, Your Honor, and I want my reduction for pandering." And that's the other thing too. He got a pandering charge, which was like a huge sentence for prostitution, for running a brothel. It was like 10 times the amount of time everybody else ever got for the same fucking crime. So if the guy was a rat, he's going to get a reduction in that. But also during that time period, they weren't doing sentence reductions. And that's just the reality of it. So was he a rat? No, I don't see it that way, because he was doing the same thing to other people that they were doing to him. They were all doing it to each other that way. They were killing bosses. They were lying about each other. They were tipping off the cops. Al Capone tipped off cops 1,000,000 times on people. So it's not like these guys, this was just the way that things functioned in those days. There is a huge difference between me, like, rubbing an elbow with a cop saying, well, this guy's bringing in a shipment, you kind of protect my area. It wouldn't be a bad thing. I'll give you a little money if this guy goes away. That's been done for decades, right? But there's a difference between that and I get pinched for a crime. I tell on everybody because I don't want to go to jail. There's a huge difference between those two things. So, all right, who is more bloodthirsty, Vito Genovese or Nicky Scarfo? Ooh, that's a tough one. I think Nicky Scarfo. With Genovese, there was a method to the madness, then there was a bottom line. With Nicky Scarfo, it was about ego, money, and power. Granted, Genovese, wanted those things too. But I don't think Genovese was going to whack people left and right because of his mental insecurities. Nicky Scarfo had a massive inferiority complex. I like to call it a Napoleon complex, which was a huge reason as to why he did things. Because Nicky Scarfo can change the trajectory of his life. And first of all, he could have left Harry Riccobene the fuck alone. He leaves him the fuck alone. That's one less problem you got to deal with. But because Nicky wanted every fucking nickel and dime and penny, he does stupid shit. And this is why his reign is so short. But there's someone or another side to that where people can make an argument to me saying, well, yeah, but he kept shit in control. Well, he didn't keep shit in control, because if he had kept shit in control, he wouldn't have killed half the people he did. Sometimes there is value in not killing a motherfucker. I'll just be honest with you. Sometimes, but Nicky wasn't like that, and I think Nicky was like that because, one, he was a fucking nutcase. That's number one. And number two, you got to look at what happened to every boss prior to him. Was killed relatively well. Fucking Testa was killed very quickly. But Bruno, everybody before him had pretty much been killed, with the exception, I think, of Sabella, So, I don't know. If Roy DeMeo and Tommy Patera were around during Murder Incorporated era, do you see Albert and Anastasia recruiting them? Oh, 100%. Probably more Tommy Patera, though, because Tommy killed mob people. I mean, granted, look, Tommy whacked Phyllis Birdie out of anger, and probably for a righteous reason. I can't disagree with his anger at Phyllis Birdie, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you could look it up for yourself. I really don't want to get into it, but more or less, Phyllis Birdie, Tommy was in love, and his girlfriend was doing drugs, and Phyllis Birdie kept pumping the drugs into her, and there needed to be, and ultimately Tommy's love of his life dies, and he's pissed because Phyllis Birdie was told to fucking knock it off, get the fuck out, and she didn't, and she gave her drugs, and she OD'd on the drugs, and so Tommy cut her fucking head off, and kept the fucking the head in the fridge. It's a little Jason Voorhees, but but short of the headless bride. Or not the headless bride, the headless whore in the fucking fridge. He didn't just kill non-mob people. Killing mob people was his thing, and for good reason. But that was the one exception to the rule. But if you look at DeMeo killed everybody. I mean, he allowed his crew to just kill at will, and those guys are dangerous to the infrastructure of the mafia. If you have a guy that isn't killing for a particular reason, just doing it because somebody pisses him off, well, that's a problem. If somebody's robbing your money, okay, you step in, you do something. But this guy just unleashed his whole crew to kill pretty much at will, kill whoever the fuck they wanted. All right. Is Frank DiMatteo's biography of Albert Anastasia total bullshit? Are there better research books on Anastasia? Honestly, I haven't read the book, but I think for the most part, there's a couple of different books, and I'll post links to that book over on Facebook, but I haven't read the book, so I can't really, validate it. All right. If Al Capone decided it wasn't worth his effort or men's blood to fight the Purple Gang for alcohol routes into Canada, if he went to war with them instead, what's your opinion on the outcome? First of all, I think Al Capone would have been killed very quickly. The money was too much, and the mafia in general wouldn't have stood for an operation to be interrupted. And this is one of the problems that Al Capone faced with Lucky Luciano when he did the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Luciano thought it was too much. Luciano thought it was ridiculous. He thought that guys could sit at a table and work things out. And Luciano felt that it brought way too much heat. And I think had Al Capone not done that, he wouldn't have been infamous. That's number one. And number two, he probably would have, I would think, had a longer reign. I mean, granted, syphilis made him crazy and all kinds of shit, but I think that he would have had a longer reign in Chicago had he not done that. And so the idea that he was going to take on the Purple Gang, fuck that. They'd have killed him. And I don't think the mob would have stepped in to help him either, because everybody was getting nickels, dimes, and pennies from that. Everybody was getting their end. And when somebody tries to step in and wants to take over what is working well, that's a quick way to get fucking killed. Absolutely. How much will defending of the New York Police Department impact the mob? I'm not sure what this question stems from, but I don't think it's going to impact them for shit. If you're talking about people standing up for NYPD, it doesn't affect them. They just mind their business and keep it moving. It won't have any impact. Now, if people defund the NYPD, which is never going to fucking happen, but if they did, then that's an impact on the mob, because then the mob is going to run crazy. And two, you got to look at the organized crime task force and the organized crime squads. I think during the Gotti time period, and I could be wrong, 16, 17, 18 squads. Now you're lucky if you get 2 covering 4 families. So, the focus from the government standpoint has really been like terrorism and stuff like that. So in many ways, that's benefited the mafia. But no, I don't think anybody defending NYPD is really going to impact them. When was the last known commission meeting? According to the feds, 1985, but I heard that there was one in the mid-90s. So I can't be specific on that, but I heard from somebody quite recently, actually, that there was one about 10 years ago. All right, young Vinny the Chin in a boxing ring with young Mickey Cohen. Who would win? Vinny the Chin, hands down. He was a good boxer, a really good boxer. He would have beat the shit out of Mickey Cohen. Are you kidding me? Mickey Cohen was all like 5'2". What's the connection between the mob and the Monzo family in New Jersey? There isn't any connection other than someone knowing someone within the Lucchese crime family. More has been made out of that bullshit than anything. That is like the mob wives on steroids, that fucking story. It's nonsense. It's ridiculous. Somebody got pissed about somebody else fucking with somebody's woman, and there you go. That's exactly what that is. But because that person had Lucchese crime family ties is the only reason why it gets written about. All right, did Joe Bonanno ever have a stake in a casino in Vegas or Cuba? Yeah, they all had percentages in different casinos, but Bonanno ended up getting chased out of the Mafia, so the likelihood is that they probably lost a lot of the percentages that they did own. I can't give you a certain stake. I know that Ray Patriarca owned like a lot of percentages in the Sands Hotel and Casino, but Frank Sinatra was the shareholder in name for his shares of the casinos, which was a smart move by Ray Patriarca. But I don't think Bonanno had a huge share of casinos. And like I said, after he gets chased out, I think he pretty much lost all of that. Has an associate ever turned down the opportunity to get made? And can you make my day by telling me, get the fuck out of here, you jerk off? Get the fuck out of here, you jerk off. No, absolutely. Some guys just don't want to be made. I've said it before, Jimmy Burke, Joe Watts, those are two guys that can't be made. Even if they offered them an opportunity, I don't think they would. You can be just as relevant in the streets without being made. If you make money and you're willing to kill, you don't need a title. I'm telling you, I've met too many guys like that. In the American Mafia, is there a rift between different ethnic Italians? Yeah, there is. It's always Sicilians and Neapolitans, sometimes bump heads. And it's always been felt, at least from the Sicilian perspective, that Northern Italians typically look down on them as peons, peasants, jerk-offs. That's been going on for hundreds of years, and I don't think that's ever going to change. Paul Castellano, who was Sicilian, notoriously had gripes with Gotti because he was, from Naples, Northern Italian. So there was that rub to it, All right, question. I'm glad you're safe and still going strong. Question I have is, if a boss wants to promote somebody and the other person turns it down, is that person marked for death or left alone? Now, you can turn down any position you want. You're the only one who's losing out on that. If a guy if he's earning a lot of cash for the family and they offer him a promotion and he turns it down, so what? Why kill him? You're still getting a cut of his money. You have a right in saying, I don't want nothing to do with this. There have been people that have said to me personally that I don't care what anybody fucking says. I don't want that job. Some guys just don't want to be boss. I think it's easier not to be boss because when the heat comes, everybody's getting fucked, especially the boss. So if you can make your money and be relatively unscathed and keep it, check your fucking ego at the door, then you got nothing to worry about it. How strong is the mob in 2020? Can you see them making a resurgence the way the Camorra has in Italy post-pandemic? Yes and no. The mob's lost a lot of money, especially with sports and gambling not being the thing it is. I mean, what are they doing? Fucking arguing, betting on whose fart's going to smell the worst? Well, what are they betting on? Cockroaches going up the fucking wall? Rats running down the street? I got lucky. Okay, I got lucky rat with the red tie over here. You got the Bruno rat with the black eyes and the pink tail. I'm betting on him. Put all your money on this fuck. Listen, so they're losing money from that perspective. But loan sharking, they're not losing money. They may be losing how much they're collecting every fucking month, but are they going to resurge? No, I don't think there's going to be a resurgence, so to speak, but it's going to be business as usual, and you're going to see, I think, once things start to really open back up in cities, you're going to see a lot of people starting to borrow money. Loan sharking's going to be the big thing. So if you're in the streets, you want some advice from me, not that anybody cares for my fucking advice. Wait till things start to open up and then start loan sharking, because right now people are going to have a problem paying back terms. So you're going to have to, bump it back from 3 weeks to 12 weeks to 24 weeks, changing your percentages. You're better off waiting until things open up, and then you find a business, guys. Then you shake them the fuck down. Then you fucking loan them money, because now they're open. They can pay back. And in some cases you can, I think here in New York, it's 9%. I know some guys that are loan sharking are at 6% in New York, but mostly it's 9% here in the city. So I think what you can do is either up the percentage because you're taking a risk, or you can lower down the terms, which would be weeks. So listen, don't listen to me. I'm not saying how to do that stuff. I'm just telling you what I would do. It's just me. Who is the greatest mob boss of all time? In my opinion, Russell Buffalino. Hands down, the greatest of all time. Not just a moneymaker, controlled other families, was really the first guy to put money in legitimate fucking rackets, stayed off the fucking radar. I mean, the guy wasn't really known until like the last few years of his life. Yeah, they knew of him, but they couldn't get nothing on him. And he never fucking died in jail like the fucking Irishman showed. He died in his own home. So, there's something to be said for that. But I think ultimately, when I combine all the things, earning power, respect, longevity, Russell Buffalino's at the top. All right, who in your opinion was the biggest racketeer out of all the mobsters in his history? Who had more going on than the rest? Tony Salerno, hands down, in my opinion, was the biggest racketeer out of every fucking guy that's ever existed. There are others that may have had more rackets, but the guy was like a $400 million in the fucking 60s or the 70s. That's fucking incredible. It's a fucking nutty amount of fucking money. But for my money, he's the guy that made the most. But were there guys that were more ingenious? No, absolutely, 100%. But for my money, Tony Salerno. Can you talk about Providence? We always hear about Patriarcha. Can you talk about some other guys from Providence, like how they used to have meetings in the Foxy Lady? So for those that don't know, the Foxy Lady is notorious for a lot of different reasons. The Foxy Lady is a strip club. There's a bunch of them. Mob guys would meet there and conduct business, sort of like the Bada Bing. And I am going to do some shows on Providence because I got some things that I'm going to talk about that nobody's ever heard before. But that's going to wait till I'm on the new platform. But it's funny because obviously this is somebody from Providence, because Foxy Lady is probably not well known outside of Providence. So that's kind of funny to me. That, and if you're from Providence, the bug on the roof, you know what I'm talking about. The bug on the roof. All right. Will us British people still be able to listen to your show on the new platform? Yes, absolutely. I know one of the problems has been on YouTube specifically, is that people in Ireland and the United Kingdom have not been able to get my show for some reason. For some reason, it's blocked in this country. I don't know why. I don't make the fucking rules. But what I can tell you is you will have no problems listening to the show on this new platform whatsoever. All right. With all these channels, Valuetainment and Vlad TV, doing shows with rats and snitches, would you ever consider going on these platforms to set the record straight on these fucks? Keep doing what you're doing and fuck a rat. Yeah, fuck a rat. Fuck a rat. Would I go on any of those shows? First of all, they'd have to pay me, which they're not going to fucking do, because if they can pay a rat $75,000, then they could definitely pay me $25 to $30. I'd go on and do it. Listen, the reason why they're not, and I'll tell you the truth, is because, first of all, me going on a show, going, this guy's a rat, and let me tell you why. That's entertainment to you guys. That's entertainment to a lot of people. But because I'm not a John Gotti or I'm not a fucking Lucky Luciano, I got nothing to say because, I'm not convicted of racketeering and murder and all this mayhem and bullshit. That's why they won't. But I would, listen, would I entertain that? Absolutely. Would I entertain sitting across from Ralph Natale and giving him a load of shit? 100%. But they're not going to do that. And here's the thing, and this is what I'm going to say about it, is that if you look at all the guys that these people have on their show, you tell me one time Patrick Bet David had every opportunity to ask tough questions to people, and he doesn't. Now, with Ralph Natale, he got a little shaky, which was kind of funny to me, because he's like, oh, fuck, look at this baldy-headed, toothless fuck I got to deal with. He didn't know whether he was going to get spit on, drooled on, or fucking bit like a fucking vampire. So no, they're not going to have me on. They're not going to have anybody on to debate these guys because, one, these guys won't do that show. They don't want to get debated. They don't want the truth thrown in their face because they can't think on their feet. They can sit there and bullshit on their own platforms. If I whacked this one, I made this amount of money. Who's going to refute them? All the little boyfriends on these shows are going to back them up, even though they didn't know each other when they were in the streets, are going to back up the bullshit because at the end of the day, they see money coming down the pike for them. So of course they're going to back up these assholes. But that's why they're never going to have me on, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to put it in their face. And what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And as a matter of fact, this is going to get me in trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway. Somebody asked me just the other day if they put a certain, and I'm not going to tell you who I'm talking about, so don't go fucking making an assumption on who I'm talking about, because it's not probably who you'd suspect. Somebody said to me, what would you do if one of these valuetainment guys or Vlad TV guys brought you on to debate this rat? And I said, well, for about the first 5 minutes, I would debate them. Then I would get up and punch them in the fucking face as hard as I could, screaming rat. Because that, to me, is justice and that's entertainment. And it would be hilarious. How quick do you think the feds would arrest me for punching an informant in the face? How quick do you think I'd be in fucking jail? Almost immediately. In fact, that's the other reason why they won't have me on. You know, because that's one of the things that these informants do. They'll say all this shit, and I watch and I see all the comments they fucking make. They abuse people online. They bully people online. But the minute you say anything to them, what's the first fucking thing? Oh, I'm turning you in. And that's what they do. And the problem, this is what people don't get, especially with like fucking pieces of retarded shit like fucking John Rubio fucking messaged me talking all this crazy shit. He knows that he can say whatever the fuck he wants to me. Because he knows the minute that I say, listen to me, you baldy-headed fuck, I'll knock your head sideways, he's going to go right to his handlers and he's going to say, oh, Jeff's threatening a fucking federal informant. That's why you can't respond to them. That's why I don't respond to them. Because that's what they do. Then you think that's a manly fucking act? That's what cowards do. If you're willing to run your cocksucker about everybody all over fucking every show you can go on, and there's many of them that do this, it's not just one or two or three, it's like 15. And they know you can't respond to them because the minute they do, they're going to invent the three typical things they always do. One, they're going to say I'm in the Mafia. That's the number one. That's happened to me multiple times. Two, then they're going to say I'm an associate of this family, that family, and the third. Then they're going to say I got chased from the streets. That's the other thing that they go with. But then the last thing that they have up their ass, which they use, is, oh, I'm turning these in. I'm going to tell my FBI handler you threatened a fucking a federal informant. That's what they do. That's not what a man does. So they could talk all this shit about, oh, you know, come and see me in the park, or come and see me, I'll be here signing my book, or I'll be over. You show up there and they see you, you're going to jail. You're going to jail because they're not going to talk shit to you. They're going to make a call and you're going to go to jail and they're going to say that you threatened them. That's not what a man does. That's what a fucking coward and a bitch does. And that's been my experience. This is why I don't fucking respond to really any haters anymore, because that's what they do. They're okay running their fucking cocksuckers about everybody, making up all kinds of lies and saying this horrible shit. And here's the thing, they never say it to you. And the minute that you address them, they threaten to call the police. Well, what the fuck is that about? You had balls to talk about me everywhere, but now that you have the opportunity to say it to me, you calling the police? This is why I don't engage them. And that's why I'm never going to be on any of those shows. Because they don't want the truth. They want the salacious bullshit. Could you imagine if they had put me next to Ralph Natale? Holy shit, you want to talk about a fucking nightmare? I'd have beat a fucking 80-year-old to death with a fucking mic stand. You know? While he's spitting and screaming that he was Dracula's blood brother or whatever the fuck nonsense he could come out with. All right, how difficult would it be for the Mafia to order a murder and make it look like COVID-19? Probably not. It probably would involve too much thinking. It would be, listen, when you could just walk up and shoot a guy, I mean, that's a lot easier than trying to devise a plan to make it look like the flu. You could pull the Richard Kuklinski maneuver and you could put arsenic in a fucking food, or arsenic in a spray and kill him that way. But to make it, see, the thing with arsenic and the thing with using cyanide is that and this is coming from the Michael Baden, who is a forensic autopsy guy, whatever. He's been on a lot of shows. One of the things about arsenic is it has a stench, like after it's been in the body. It smells like chestnuts, right? So the whole thing with using arsenic or cyanide is that it's very, very hard to detect. So if they do an autopsy, they have to be looking for it to find it. And usually the people that have been killed by arsenic, they don't even find out till like 3 years after somebody dies, because when they exhume the body, the fingernails keep a brown tint of the arsenic, and that's how they find it, and it stays in your hair. So unless they're looking for it, they're not going to find it. And arsenic mimics a heart attack. So therefore, unless a family ultimately wants to have an autopsy, they're never going to know. And that's why people get away with using that. So not that I'm telling anybody how to murder anybody, so don't go off and do that crazy shit, you knuckleheads, but that would be it. All right. Why didn't the mob move heavily into Mexico after Cuba broke down, or has there ever been a mob presence in Mexico then? There is not now. They're really, or in the early days, we're talking about Bugsy Siegel type of days. There was inroads into Mexico because the Italians were dealing with the Mexicans as far as drug trafficking routes. Those are still routes that are used today. But as far as having a huge presence there, no. I think we know who runs Mexico. It's the Sinaloa cartel. And that's just the way it is. And that's the way it's always going to be. So I'm just going to leave that there. All right. Last question. We know Gambino was a killer in his younger days. That being said, do you believe that Furio best resembles how brutal Gambino was in the Hitman days? If not, which mobster had the same brutality that Furio had? And is it just me, or does Furio look like a young Carlo with long hair? Gambino was a killer. But I don't think that Gambino was quite the Furio junta of the Mafia as far as brutality. There has been rumors that he killed people in Italy, killed people when he came here, but I don't think those numbers are huge. I don't think you could even call Gambino brutal as far as a hitman. But somebody that was Furio-like, I have some ideas, but I don't want to make any associations with those people, only because some people may look at Furio as a fucking a bullshit character. I don't want to disrespect nobody, but if you're looking at that type of person, Tommy Patera is one that comes to mind. Cesar Bonaventure was one that comes to mind. There are some guys that just love to kill. I mean, that's the reality of it, I guess. All right. So all that being said, that's all we're going to do for today. I would love to tell you when we're going to be back. I would love to tell you when the next show is going to be. But there are some things that have to sort of take place this week that I'm trying to get done and handled. And as soon as I know, you'll know there'll be a big announcement about it. And we'll just go from there. If this is something that's going to be dragged out another 2 weeks, then obviously I'll do a show in between. But just keep it posted to fucking over on Facebook, Mob Talk Radio. Give us a follow, give us a like, subscribe, whatever the fuck the case may be. But we will not be back on YouTube if everything takes place in the next week or so. It's not going to be on YouTube's platform. And those who are listening on YouTube right now, it's very simple. Instead of going to YouTube, you're just going to go to a web address and you're going to get all the shows there. And there are some celebrities that are doing podcasts on there as well. So you can just listen to them as well as me. And I'm really looking forward to the new platform if this is the way it goes. Like I said, I'm pretty much 95% sure that's where we're going to be in a week or so. At least the agreement will be done in a week or so. And then I will probably take a week off or a week half off just to get the first show together, because the first show needs to be really good. So in the meantime, you can send your threats, your hatred, your compliments to the same usual places. Wear a fucking mask. Don't be stupid. Just wear a mask. Besides, you know what's funny about wearing a mask? I never thought I would see a day where I could go into a fucking bank wearing a ski mask and nobody would say a fucking thing. So if you're going to rob a bank, now's the time to do it, right? And whatever you do, don't use me as your fucking your antithesis to break the law. Do it on your own. Don't bring me up. I got enough fucking problems. All right. So all that being said, we'll see everybody hopefully next week. Like I said, I'm waiting to see how this deal fleshes out. The sooner that gets done, the sooner I can make an announcement. But if we get to say Friday or Saturday of next week and things still haven't fucking been fully taken care of, then obviously I'll come back and I'll do a show. And that will be the plan going forward. But like I said, I'm hoping that this is going to get done probably by mid or right towards the end of the week. So as soon as I know, you'll know.